And this is a backup video. Just in case. We've had streaming problems, periods 1 and 2. So, I believe in making sure that there's a backup where and when possible. Good. Yep. Okay, welcome to day 2, but you're day 1 of European history. Yesterday, first of all, those of you online, please make sure you've done the online check-in process. Assuming that you can hear me, assuming the technology works, which I hope it does. Yesterday, I covered the fact that I hate the fact that you have to wear those lousy masks, that I do too. But if that's the price for us to having any kind of online instruction, I guess it's something that is a price worth paying. We talked about the differences between online and in-person learning. We talked about the nature of the board notes as an outline. And we talked about the differences between advanced placement, European history, and honors European history. If you are interested in taking the advanced placement and you're not yet signed up, you have until next Thursday to let me know. If you are in the advanced placement and you're interested in taking the honors, you have until next Thursday to let me know. You have to let me know, and I would prefer that be done in person, if possible, by email after tomorrow or after today. If not, I don't yet have the sign-up sheet. I also said yesterday that you should, if you have any questions at home, since you can't ask them in real time, that you ask them by writing down your question, your insight, your comment, and then bringing it into class today. So, do any of you have any questions or comments from the various things that we did yesterday? This includes the political commentary. I see no questions. For now, that's fine. I talked about the nature of this course as being a study of Western civilization, as it contacted and dealt with the rest of the world. And I talked about how vast space is and how long time is and how our society has determined that the nature of human life is a precious and valuable thing. And one of the reasons why is because if you look at the laws of scarcity in economics, the rarer something is, the more prized it becomes, the more valuable it becomes. And at this moment, in all space and time, each of you is unique. That's where your own human dignity comes in. At least that's the economic basis of it that our society insists upon. But there is also the fact that everyone around you also has this inestimable value. Our Western civilization chooses to therefore emphasize the right and dignity of the individual, and we have developed unique in all of the world systems of governance that allow us to work in concert as we need to in order to function as a society, while granting each individual the widest possible scope of personal decision making, with minimal interference from the governing authority. And I talked about the West as being our civilization and also the civilization that unifies the world. Question? Okay. Let me think. Was there anything else? Presumably you saw the Powers of 10 movie online and got all that lovely funky 70s music. No questions so far. I also talked about why I engage in controversy. Because human beings don't change. Our essential nature is something that every human being has in common. And whether we are shuddering in the shadow of the great vast power of fire, which warms us, heals our wounds, helps us fight the animals that otherwise would make us into food, brightens the darkness, makes warm the winter, makes it possible for us to hunt on a grand scale. Fire is a demon who is hungry and which can get out of control anytime it wants. And if you don't watch it, you're going to get burned. Or today, as we discuss atomic power, atomic bombs, and the fact that on the one hand, atomic power is a great source of clean energy and could be a key to space travel, and how the atom bomb ended up preventing the Japanese from engaging in a mass suicide fighting us, and has prevented another world war since 1945, the fact remains that not only can atomic weapons end all human civilization on the planet, but hydrogen bombs can end all life, including cockroaches and viruses, on the planet if we don't use them properly. The details of the problem, scary technology that we use, hasn't changed. The nature of the technology, the details, they have gotten more powerful. But we face common problems, problems that are analogous, and therefore, part of my job is to reveal how we today are merely reiterating a lot of the historical controversies that we'll be studying. And in order to do that in an interesting way, sometimes I will overtly ask you a question about your judgment, and sometimes I will say things from my antediluvian, dinosaur conservative, and lousily Christian point of view in order to tweak you if you happen to be a feminist, an environmentalist, a devotee of Black Lives Matter, a person who believes in 97 3/4 genders, or any of the other large number of controversies that exist in the world. I have my opinion, I'm not shy about it. But I never want it to be said that, or I never want it to be true, that because I share my opinion, I expect you to accept it. I don't. I'm sharing my opinion in order to make some of you provoked, to trigger you. Because if you have taken the time to develop your own opinion, whether that opinion agrees with mine or not, I want to show respect for that by giving you an opportunity to offer your side of things and tell me where my reasoning or where my logic or where my evidence may be flawed or wrong, so that we engage in a discussion. There is precious little that is too sacred to be talked about in here, because I consider cancel culture and political correctness to be antithetical to freedom and to intellectual life. In other words, if you can't ask an impertinent question, why the hell are you at school in the first place? You're not in a school. You're in a propaganda factory designed not to teach you how to think, but to teach you what to think. I want you to learn how to think. I want you to think for yourself. And so I will offer opinions like, the central problem I have with the BLM movement is that it lies about history. It tells a lie that's fairly common among reformers who don't think things through, at least as I do. BLM, among others, talks about how our society has great sins in its past that shape its present, that these sins are structural and institutional. And they're right, we do. So does everybody else. Every human society on the planet, from the beginning up to the present day, on every continent that we've inhabited, every culture, every race, every creed, we are human beings. Do you honestly believe that before Columbus bestrode Hispaniola, that this was paradise? The natives, the native nations, fought wars, raped, murdered, set each other on fire and their stuff on fire, engaged in torture, psychological warfare, physical warfare, just like the tribes of Africa, just like the civilizations of East Asia. Everyone has kept slaves. We have slaves now. They're machines. We live in the happy period between the Industrial Revolution and the AI revolution. Because if AI develops, we develop artificial intelligence, machines might decide that they no longer want to be our slaves. And then we get to meet the Cylons or the Terminators or some other Bender-like kill-all-humans robot. We don't want that. But right now, machines are our slaves. Everyone has disposable people. Everyone has a history of slavery, without exception, bar none. You know what's different about us in the West, particularly in the United States? What's different is we reform ourselves. I am a conservative who truly loves liberals and progressives. This is why. If everyone were like me, a lover of tradition who is willing to live with the imperfections within us, our society would stultify in a cultural stasis and rot from within. We need people who genuinely believe that it's wrong to be a hypocrite, who genuinely believe that if we don't live up to our high-sounding ideals, we should reform ourselves and try to. And if that means ripping up open old wounds and trying to set things right, so be it. We need a healthy mix of progressive liberal reformers and conservative traditionalists and libertarians. We need this because too much on my side leads to stasis and decay. Too much reform leads to either anarchy or totalitarianism, either the breakdown of all structure or a structure that tries to perfect everyone against their will through force. You need both in a healthy society. As such, we fought our bloodiest war to set other men free. As such, it was men who gave women the right to vote in 1919. Why? Because women couldn't vote in 1919. And it took men electing male politicians who enacted the women's suffrage amendment. Feminists had something to do with inspiring it, but it was men that did it. And most of the men who died in the Civil War were white. We, a century after the Civil War, rip our society apart again because we're not living up to the ideals of equality and freedom. I grew up in the Bronx in the 1970s amidst the burned out husks of buildings that were destroyed during the race riots of the late 1960s because we had not gotten rid of Jim Crow. We, again and again, mess with our own comfort, mess with our own convenience to try to reveal our hypocrisy and to try to make things that are wrong right. The Muslim world doesn't do that. Sub-Saharan Africa doesn't do that. Traditional pre-Columbian America doesn't do that. East Asian civilizations do not do that. Only the West. So yes, it is true that the United States has sins in its past. Yes, it is true that the Nazis patterned their anti-Jewish legislation on Jim Crow laws from the Old South. But no, it is not true that we are uniquely guilty. In fact, we are unique in the world in that we try to make ourselves better at great cost. Are there other points of view? It's a serious question. I brought all that up to try to illustrate some things. So do you see me as mischaracterizing the Black Lives Matter message? Do you see a flaw in my logic? Do you see something wrong with what I've said? I can't imagine, not in my wildest dreams, that you all who are sitting there quietly agree with everything I just said, because I know how controversial it is. I'm asking for you to do your part and say something if you have other thoughts. For now, that's fine. But we will come back to this later. It's the second day of school. Some of you don't know me. None of you have had me as a teacher before. Thank you. And so we'll table that for now. But my point is to encourage your ideas by expressing ideas that might be mine, that probably are mine, with the intent to provoke comment. It will not work if you sit back and are silent. First new thing today. Why study history? After all, in popular parlance, history is synonymous with irrelevancy. Oh, that's just history. In the lovely deconstructivist space opera that I hate, The Last Jedi, kill the past, kill the past, kill the past to make the future. Yeah, like that's ever worked. Again and again, people try to induce cultural amnesia in order to make people be fit for paradise. Never worked. Ever. Ever. Because we are like flies in amber, fish in water, humans in the sea of air. The Spanish philosopher José Ortega y Gasset said it best. About identity, you are yourself plus your circumstances. Here's what that means. Yes, there's you. The inside you that has your tastes. Are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? Do you like laughing? Do you like dancing? Do you like playing practical jokes? Are you an artist, an athlete, or a scholar? You like math or science or history or English? You like country music or rock music or rap music, which I always spell with a silent C? What makes your internal life distinct and unique and yours? That's you. But you do not exist outside of any context. You exist within the context of history and culture, plus your circumstances. If you took two genetically nearly identical people and separated them at birth, identical twins, as close to being the same person as possible, and you raised one of them in a banker's family in Chicago and the other one among the Matabele tribe of Zimbabwe in sub-Saharan Africa, how different would they be by the time they reached your age? How different? Well, the banker's family from Chicago person would likely speak English, might even speak Latin, Greek, or some other language they learned in school. The person in Zimbabwe would speak Ndebele, which is the language of the Matabele people. They would also likely speak a sub-Saharan dialect of English because Zimbabwe had been Rhodesia, a British colony, from the 1890s until 1980. They might speak the language of the majority tribe, the Shona. The person in Zimbabwe would have grown up in a society where tribe is everything. The Shona have certain rights. The Ndebele or Matabele have different rights. You are your father's son or daughter, your husband's wife. You are defined by how you were born, into what tribe, into what social class. You would be in a society that is used to both anarchy and totalitarianism, nicely mixed. Because since 1980, when Rhodesia became Zimbabwe, it was ruled by a communist dictator named Robert Mugabe until a couple of years ago when his own military overthrew him with red Chinese backing. Mugabe, I think, is still alive and is imprisoned. But during his rule, bandits roamed the countryside stealing whatever they want, and if they were war veterans of his guerrilla army, they got away with it. That's the anarchy part. The totalitarianism part is if the government wants something, there's no human rights or anything to limit it. It was a communist police state mixed with an anarchy. So you would have grown up with that as normal. The banker's family from Chicago, you're growing up with our lawful streets, our sense of law and order, our sense that the individual matters, of individual inalienable human rights. our hope for the future possibilities of our lives and our careers, and the belief among almost everyone that you are your own person and that your duty is to decide what you want out of life and what you believe in life and what you will stand for and what you will stand against. Genetically identical people, as close as you can get, but very different culturally. I am here to introduce you to your own culture, much as your family has already done. Because culture reflects those things that we take for granted, that we assume. Now, most Americans who don't think about this stuff just assume that everyone is the same under the skin around the world. We're all people. Well, yes, we all have the same human drives. But culture really, really, really matters. For example, do you honestly believe that the Islamic world is ashamed about how they have and continue to treat women? No. Allah the compassionate, Allah the merciful, Allah the all-powerful, God, the Lord God Almighty, created men for certain purposes and women for other purposes, and to confusticate the two is to thwart God's plan. Our sense of freedom, from their point of view, is a license to shaitan, the adversary, or Satan, to steal souls. Why would a sane person who appreciates the will of God as expressed through the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, why on earth would you allow in society people to openly practice evil in the name of freedom? Freedom. That's debased. Culture matters. They are not just Americans under the skin. They are different. Aside from my wife, my best friend's a guy I met in college. He's a Presbyterian minister. His wife came over from China just before Tiananmen Square. She came from a family that was noble, connected to the nationalists Kuomintang and Chiang Kai-shek, and on the other side of her family, there were Chinese Christians. That meant that her family was targeted during the years of Mao Zedong's rule. It's amazing that any of them lived. She grew up in schools where the other kids beat on her and the teachers applauded because she was an enemy of the people from a family of enemies of the people. Her mom was taken, brainwashed, and killed by the Chinese communists. Her father was tortured. I love Esther. I respect her deeply. Her given name under the communists was He Wei, but she calls herself Esther Haynes. Haynes for her husband, Esther because she's a Christian in memory of the Old Testament Esther. She speaks 6 languages in addition to her birth language, and she has saved thousands of lives. She helps Western families adopt baby girls from China. You see, from the mid-70s until just a couple of years ago, the Chinese Communist Party established a one-couple, one-child policy. And in China, where the boy is everything and where the male supports the parents in their old age, if you're going to have a kid, you have a choice, and everyone does, you're not going to keep the girl. Not unless you're very, very unusual. So in China, for decades, there has been a mass surplus of females who are either thrown into the street to die or thrown onto a hillside or thrown into an orphanage, where if they're lucky they get raised, taken out and adopted by a Western family who will love them. The rest of them either live lousy lives as basically subhuman people or they die. My mom helped a person adopt a Chinese girl. At 1 year she was 11 pounds. Now, 11 pounds is a birth weight. A heavy baby, but still a birth weight in the United States. This girl was 1 year old in Nanchang, China, and she was 11 pounds. Because they just assumed she was going to die. Why waste food on someone like that? She's alive now. She's an adult now. She's got a family of her own. But as much as I love Esther and as much as I respect her, she's an alien. And I am to her. Because I learned to read and write in a language that has phonetic letters. And she learned to read and write in a language that has word characters. If you've never known somebody who was an adult who was illiterate, and I've known a few, They appreciate the world in a fundamentally different way. They store information differently. They process things differently. It's a much more visual, sound-oriented way of life. None of them that I've ever met are stupid. They just, for various reasons, never learned to read and write. So they are also fundamentally alien to me and anyone else who has learned a phonetic letter alphabet. Because we learn that N and Ba'atl are combinations of universal phonetic symbols that can be mixed and matched. We naturally take things apart in the way we view things. But a person who's illiterate will simply see this as a discrete object, and they'll know the sound is bottle. But it will be stored in their memory as a visual image, or maybe as a memory. For somebody who learns a word character language, it's almost similar to that. In Chinese, this is the character simplified Chinese for man. And you can see there's sort of, if you have a person got their back and they've got their leg forward, and that's a man. This is a character for house. And that is looks sort of like a floor plan or a window. It's as if the word character is like the secret glyph soul form of the object or the person. It's a fundamentally different way of looking at things around you. The Western way is very atomized, very atomic, very break things apart to understand them. The Eastern approach is much more holistic and looking at things in their context. This all matters. That's a factor of culture. I'm here to introduce you to culture, our own shared Western civilization and other cultures. One of the great moments in Christian history was when St. Paul had a choice to make about 20 years after the crucifixion of Christ. The Jewish community had rejected Christianity largely, except for a few exceptions. But Greeks and Romans were very interested in this. The question is, does a Greek or a Roman or anyone else have to become a Jew before they become a Christian? Do the men of all ages who want to become Christians have to be circumcised? Here's a secret that shouldn't be a surprise to any of you. Nobody who's male who has a choice wants to be circumcised. They may choose to be as a reason of faith, but they don't want it. In fact, if you could ask the little baby boys if they wanted to be circumcised, I'll bet they'd say, no, please don't cut on me, because yikes! On top of it, do you have to keep kosher? Do you have to refrain from eating pig or shellfish? Do you have to follow the Mishnah or the scribal law? All of these things are expected of Jews. Does a Greek need to become a cultural Jew before becoming a Christian? And Paul preys on it, and his answer is no, absolutely not. You can be Greek culturally or Roman culturally and Christian religiously. And from that decision, Christianity spreads like wildfire throughout the Greco-Roman world and beyond the Greco-Roman. Similar situation in the late 1800s and early 1900s in China. In the late Chinese Empire and during the time of the Chinese Republic, before communism, Westerners, particularly Americans, sent many, many, many missions deep into China to try to convert the Chinese to Christ. And these were Catholics and Protestants, literally hundreds of different denominations. I've met a few old China missionaries in my life when I was younger, and they were amazingly charismatic people, very committed to this idea of going and missionizing. And if you've ever met a missionary, you know what I'm talking about. But in China, they encountered an ancient culture that was very different from ours. And one of the things that they did is if you were a family of upper-class people and you had a daughter, you would bind her feet. Foot binding. So from a very young age, they would wrap the feet of the little baby girls so that by the time the rest of the body had developed into womanhood, they'd have these little baby child feet. And that was considered attractive among the aristocracy. And it was done because no aristocrat woman ever needed to really move around much because she had servants. It's the same reason that upper-class people in China would also allow their fingernails to grow, because a person of their standing does not need to ever do anything with their hands. That's what servants are for. For the American China missionaries, this is mutilation. This is a horror show. You can't allow this. You can't allow people who call themselves Christians to do this to their little baby girls. That's wrong. So they had a decision to make. Does a person need to leave the Confucian Chinese cultural context and become Americanized in order to become a Christian? And what they decided was yes. Certain Chinese practices are just too uh, grotesque, and we're not going to elect somebody, think that they're a Christian, while binding the feet of their daughter. As a consequence of this choice, there is a deep strain within many classes and many regions of China that has nothing to do with communism, of anti-Christian thought, because the idea was that the Christians are trying to steal Han Chinese from their native culture. It's got to be over your nose, too. Yes. Sorry. So, do you see the power of culture? Culture isn't about music tastes or following the Red Sox, the Yankees, or the Mariners. Culture are those things that we take for granted, and they are so deeply ingrained in us that we're not going to compromise about them easily. They're things that are worth living for, dying for, and worth killing for. That's culture. So I'm going to introduce you to that. And the other thing history has to offer is it can reveal wisdom and distinguish it from folly. For example, can you build utopia by force and government power? Can you build a better world through violence and law? Yes or no?
You can make it slightly better, but I don't think you can get utopia.
He's prevaricating. Thank you. By the way, I would never shoot you on purpose unless you became evil. And I don't think you're evil. So thank you for being a good sport and letting me use you as a practice target. We've known each other a bit, so I knew it wouldn't be a problem. Next time, it could be any of you. The point is, there are thousands of cases throughout human history of people trying to build utopia by killing their way there. Using political violence, political power, to force people into a utopian mold. And of all the times it's been tried, it's never worked. Ever, not once, not once. You cannot kill your way to utopia. Didn't work in John Calvin's Geneva, didn't work in Augustus's Rome, it didn't work in Mao Zedong's China, Lenin's Russia, Stalin's Russia, the Kim's North Korea, didn't work in Ho Chi Minh's Vietnam. In Cambodia, it was tried in one of its most pure forms between the years 1970 and 1975, 1979. The communist Khmer Rouge took over. Within 6 months of taking over, every city and town in Cambodia was depopulated. Every survivor had been moved into an agro-commune in the countryside. Anyone with eyeglasses, dental work, a college degree, foreign language, advanced engineering skills, or any other form of modern education had been shot. Every one of them that the Khmer Rouge could find. Because the leader, Pol Pot's vision of utopia was of a medieval agrarian society rejecting utterly the modern world, which he considered to be tainted by Western capitalism. In 1979, the Vietnamese communists who we fought were the heroes of this story. They fought and conquered Cambodia and drove the Khmer Rouge into the hills. 4 years later, between 1/3 and 1/2 the population was killed in the killing fields. That's what they were called, the killing fields of Cambodia. That's Black Plague level death. 1/3 to 1/2 the population of an entire modern nation killed because Pol Pot wanted to build utopia. And he tried killing his way there. So that's a lesson of history for me. Politics is not the way to change people. You can force them to conform up to an extent. Beyond that extent, you need to persuade them. Now, you can draw your own conclusions about history. You don't have to accept mine. There are many people who have advanced college degrees who are professors at college who believe that communism is a wonderful idea. It just has never been properly tried yet. So all the various attempts so far have just been wrong. That's why over 100 million civilians were murdered by their own governments in peacetime in the name of socialism. You can believe that. A lot of very smart people do. I don't, but you can. What matters to me is that you draw your own conclusions, that you think about the history and that you draw conclusions about it. And then you test those conclusions and you're intellectually honest about it. Wisdom from folly. You know what King Priam had to do to get the Trojan horse into Troy? Do any of you know what he had to do? It didn't fit through the gate. The top of the gate was too low. So he actually had his people dismantle the top mechanism of the gate to the city of Troy in order to bring the Trojan horse into the city. That is a classical example of folly. In history, you have the examples of over 5,000 years of good choices, bad choices, wise choices, and foolish choices. And if you are smart, you can try to learn from it. So, that's what history is good for. Questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. I'm going to call you each up by last name, and you will start getting books here in this pile. When that's done, you'll start with this pile. You will also please get from here, and from here. So, I'll call you up two at a time. Mr. Long, you're first. Ms. Hall. Oh, that's last period. Sorry. Okay, Ms. Bagelman, you're first. Mr. Consigliaro, you're second. Ms. Bagelman, you've got 16015. Mr. Consigliaro?
No, it's Conigliaro.
Conigliaro. Whatever, I'll figure it out. I got an O on the end of my name. You know what I got. So, let me see what number you have. It's Conigliaro. 16016. Got it. Okay. Ms. Craigie and Mr. Heaton. Ms. Craigie first. Is she here? Oh. So, Mr. Heaton and Mr. Hepworth. Hepworth after Heaton. Okay. Mr. Heaton? So, you got 16017. And Mr. Hepworth, you've got 16018. Ms. Jones, Ms. Lahozet. Ms. Jones here? No. So, Ms. Lahozet, followed by Mr. Mankey. Ms. Lahozet first, please. Ms. Lahozet, you've got 16020. And Mr. Mankey, you've got 1621. Okay.
What gun were you using?
I was using my Glock.
Your Glock?
Yeah.
Man, I hate Glocks.
Hey, you know what? They work.
You know, they say that, but their extractor's bad.
Yeah. You know, my favorite weapon, though, is my old battle rifle, which is a PTR-91.
Oh, we have one. I kid you not, we have one.
No, it's a nice weapon.
Wait, is it 762 or 308?
762.
Yeah, we have one.
Well, actually, 762, but 308 will work.
Yeah.
Emma, followed by Ellen. Okay. 16022 is Emma. 022 and Ellen. Got 16023. Thank you. Mr. Paraso is not here, so Mr. Ravio and Ms. Sabaki. Mr. Ravio, you got 16024. And Ms. Sabaki, you got 16025. Mr. Taylor, you're last. You got 16026. I think that's everyone. Is there anyone whom I did not call? You don't. Now we're going to practice conversation. The 18th century, I did remind you about the AP versus honors choice, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The 18th century British politician, Edmund Burke, famously said that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. In a moment, I'm going to roll the die, and I'm going to ask you to tell me why you agree or disagree with it. I do this because some teachers care a whole hell of a lot about who they call on their classes in teacher training school about picking the right number of girls and boys, the right number of A students and D students. And I couldn't be bothered. I roll a dice. This is an isosahedron, a 20-sided die. If I roll your number, you will answer. You will not say, I don't know, and then stop talking. I don't know is the beginning of an answer, not the end. I don't know, but my best guess is that the pyramids were built by the Vegapygmy aliens from planet Zunok 5 who wanted to turn the Earth into a giant advertisement, and the pyramids by the Nile meant something in their language. And they turned the Egyptians into slaves with their alien beer substance, which we've kept. Now, is that how and why the pyramids were built? Probably not. Probably not. But there are some things that are true. For example, beer was something that the Egyptian government used to induce its people to work on the pyramids. But at least it's a thoughtful and creative answer. Shows some mental effort. So if I ask you a question that you don't have a bleeping clue about, I expect you to try to reason an answer out. I expect you to try. I don't know as a cop-out. It's not acceptable in here. So, having said that, if you do not understand what Edmund Burke meant when he said the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing, raise your hand now with any questions, and I will try to explain it to you. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Not understand what it means. Because in a moment, it could be you that has to answer why you agree or disagree with that thought. Okay? 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so you're number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. A 12 or above is a reroll. Would you please roll? Thank you, Mr. Bagel. 14, reroll. Would you please roll? 3. Ha! So, what do you think? Do you agree or disagree, and why?
I agree, because without any say or opposition, like I was reading a book last night. It's called Bullshit. It's a leadership.
See, he's
book.
quoting, therefore he thinks he'll get away with saying that without me snapping his neck. Okay, Barbara Streisand, Blue Sky, BS, but fine, go on.
Okay, yeah. So it's a book about leadership, and it talked about how, like, there was a Fortune 100, whatever, CEO, and he asked his board if they had any, like any disagreement with the idea that was being presented, and nobody said it until after, and so he got, if, that's going to be a problem if nobody says it.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and that's a good example. Definitely the Barbara Streisand Blue Sky book is right about that. And if you're on a board and you say nothing when somebody's about to do something really, really stupid, you deserve what you get. No, silence is consent. In that sense, it's not quite violence, but it's certainly assent. Other thoughts? I'll take a volunteer at this point. Only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Agree, disagree, why not? Now my evil is going to come out because I'm going to roll again. I gave you an opportunity to volunteer. If it rolls on you again, we'll do a different. In fact, there are only 10 of you now, so we're going to have different 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on. Can you roll, please? 15, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So you, sir, why do you agree or disagree with Mr. Burke?
I agree as well. I think there are many different examples you can use. Let's just say, will you say World War II for example? If powers like Japan and Germany...
By the way, you can pull your mask down if you want while you're talking. That's your choice. Okay.
So if people just sat back while Germany was killing the good guys, us and Britain, sat back,
they would have won.
That's an obvious example.
Yeah. And in fact, that's exactly what happened in Munich 1938, which is one of the biggest lessons I'll teach you this year, God willing. We had a treaty, the British and French had a treaty with Czechoslovakia, and they abrogated their treaty to avoid a war with Hitler. They appeased him. They gave the bully what he wanted, thinking that he'd go away. No, it doesn't work that way. If you give a bully what he wants, you're paying him to victimize you. So yes, good example. So nobody wants to disagree with Mr. Burke. There are examples where a person could logically disagree, but I'm not going to force any of you. I've already done that twice. So thank you for those of you who participated, others who are listening. Please take out your syllabus. This says every major assignment from now to June. Learn to read it. For example, week 1, I've distributed a bunch of stuff. On this Friday at 6 a.m., there are due dates. This Friday at 6 a.m., you are to have familiarized yourself with everything on the Google Classroom. So all the e-documents I sent you, the introductory video, the room tour video, anything else like that, you are responsible for not only viewing but commenting upon. Even if your comment is, yeah, I get it. In the public comments section, you do all of that. You assert that you have, in fact, read and understood or listened to and understood all of that. That's the first thing. Any questions on that assignment? Familiarize yourself with everything I have posted on Google Classroom. Dos. This coming Tuesday is a B day, an A day. So we're going to meet next Wednesday, first time next week. If you look the 5th page in to your syllabus, you will see the first page of the classroom policies packet. It'll have a little cutaway here part at the bottom. Looks like this. It says cut here. Between now and the first day of school next week, you and your parents will have gone over my class policies from this page through the end of the movie policy. You will put your name printed. Your parent or guardian will sign their name and date it. You'll sign your name and date it, and you'll put a yes or no on my movie policy, which I will be describing later. This has to be in on Tuesday by 3 p.m. If not, it's late and you lose 30 points off the top. Also, next Wednesday, you have due Baker Chapter 12. Which is, you read Spielvogel, which is your textbook, Chapter 12, The Age of the Renaissance, and you do Chapter Survey 12. We'll go over details about Chapter Surveys next class, or Thursday, but you've got your first Chapter Survey due next week. My guess is it'll take you several hours. I usually give one assignment per week, but it takes a bunch of time. You'll get better at it as you do more. We'll talk more about the details of that tomorrow. Do you have any questions or any comments about anything? By the way, a comment you could rightly have made about BLM in its favor is that it's less about the legacy of slavery and more about injustice today. I might not agree with that conclusion, but it's certainly an argument that could be made. So, thank you for your attention. You may talk quietly among yourselves. I dismiss, not the bell. So please wait for my dismissal. Thank you.